Hey.
I don't think I've met either of you. I'm Carrie Daggett. Are you William?
Yeah, that's me.
You're William.
I'm William. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
Officially.
and you're David. Nice to meet you. Have you met Andrew Decker?
Nope, neither.
I'm Ingrid, the Senior Assistant City Attorney. Hi,
Good to
William.
meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm the city attorney.
Okay, Carrie. and
I've
Ingrid.
seen you at council meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Across the room.
You only get 2 minutes to.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Talk,
I'm
so.
usually not saying
Sorry.
anything. I'm
David?
just listening.
Kevin
so.
Cronin.
Kevin.
I'm the Assistant Chief of Police.
Good to meet you guys.
Let's see.
Well,
And I know we had talked a little bit about trying to make sure we had laid out kind of what all we wanted to be talking about, just because we have, I think the maximum time we have is 45 minutes because of next meetings that people have. So that's till about 3:15. And so I don't know if it'd be helpful to kind of sort out what all we want to make sure we get to today, and we're here to make sure we're listening and hearing what you've got to say, and so.
sure. Yeah, we were trying to put together some sort of agenda. It's kind of hard. There's just a lot to talk about. So we figured we'd start with just as many variables that we could get out on the table. I think in about 30 minutes we can get it out, and then maybe a Q&A and or which direction to go and or so forth and so on.
And can I
but-
just tell you, I don't have the best hearing,
That's okay.
and this room in particular, like the fans are always running
Yeah.
and stuff.
Turn one on.
So I may say, I'm sorry, repeat that again. So I just wanted to warn you, because I'm always trying to catch up, because I don't think it's great.
No worries. So, boy, we've been kind of working our way up to this point for a very long time. We're really good to meet you guys. The way we've been able to talk on the streets with some of the lower level people is a little bit more difficult. They want to save it for court and so forth and so on. But at this point, we've done enough of our investigation, and we feel like we've given you guys, when we say you, is always general, you guys have good faith, that basically we're just trying to bridge a gap of information that we think has now reached epic proportions of miscommunications. So bad news bears, we got to get everything out on the table. And so this is nice because bureaucratically it's going to be a little bit better. But basically, there's a quick background we always like to give everyone that we talk to on the streets. So we're hometown natives, born here. Mormon family came here from Utah, though. So they basically started raising family here. We had a lot of problems growing up with our Mormon family being raised in a regular society, non-Mormon. So we kind of gained on those values. Basically, I ended up not really having my medical needs met, so I had a childhood kleptomania problem, and my parents kind of prayed over it and never really did anything about it. It was actually a relatively simple situation. I was a really good kid, but still kind of just learning bad kid.
Mormons have a personal religious philosophy of praying over modern medicine. It's a generalized term of basically not seeing more critical cases in Utah. Basically, kept
So there were,
several occasions.
yeah, so ones where CPS should have got involved, some where I stole from my own parents, they never did anything about it. And eventually at 18 and a half, I got caught up with adult crimes, but I was still a kid, still in high school. I had friends that I would hang out with and do illegal things with. There's 3 people. There's Carrie, Kenneckett, Dennis, Tice, and Scotty Lyle. These are 3 friends that I knew that basically I committed theft crimes with. We would go steal things out of cars. I ended up writing these people bad checks. They ended up cashing these checks at banks, and that's when obviously the assistant gets involved. I'm the fall guy. I kind of end up being the one that everyone told and I believed, don't say anything, you'll be a snitch, so I don't say anything at all until it's too late. What ends up happening real quick is these 3 people claimed to not know me when they did an investigation. You guys did an investigation. These 3 people basically said that they gave me the money. I couldn't prove that they didn't give me the money, and I was at the same time kind of being coerced through this. You'll lose a trial. I had a public defender, so I thought I had covered everything. But basically, I reported. This is 2004, by the way, 12 years ago.
I was going to ask you.
And so basically, we had.
It was a Judge Blair case.
Yeah, so she's the one that kind of ended up doing the Timothy Masters thing wrong. But basically, I ended up reporting these 3 people to her, as well as to my public defender, to the DA, to my family, everybody. No one did anything. Everyone kind of told me to request some sort of restitution hearing. basically, but at the same time, I was being convinced to like plead guilty because I wrote the checks and so forth. And so I ended up pleading guilty to $25,000, 6 of which was what I actually ended up getting. So this is just a really weird scenario in my life, but basically I ended up trying to be as good of a person as I can. I ended up getting actually duped and coerced and pleading guilty for crimes I didn't even do. And so that started my life at a nice big price tag. And these 3 people went away with no felonies, no investigation. There were actually bankers involved that were able to testify that they saw suspicious behavior. Basically, I ended up reporting it all to Pete Baker, the investigator. Anyway, 4 years later, he said there was nothing that he could do. I ended up talking to a whole bunch of lawyers. They said there's nothing that they can really do. And basically, trying to withdraw a plea is kind of tough. We've had to find the right paradigm to argue down, and we ended up realizing that the public defender system is probably the biggest culprit here. But basically, fast forward 4 years later, I'm just trying to figure this out. I'm paying this money that I don't even owe. Jobs are discriminating against me, so it's kind of hard to get jobs. Places are discriminating against me now. So at that point, Dave is kind of my only witness, my only friend at the time, falling away from the Mormon faith too. I tell him all about it. He ends up kind of going.
A lot in between rental situations when he couldn't make it in between jobs and places that accepted his felony on his record. And basically, our extended family, or our closest family, has basically never helped us barely financially forever. And we also have.
I was going to, in order, I have to get this all in order context. Okay, that's the tough part. So basically, when I tell my brother about it, he's already going through some problems himself, falling away from the Mormon faith and with work environments. We're trying to report workman's comp situations or being assaulted on the job, his car vandalized. It was from a false rape accusation. And so he ends up trying to report my crimes on top of his crimes to my parents, who end up misdiagnosing him with bipolar and now consider him sort of like a political dissident or a crazy person, something like that. Basically, he got a doctor involved that my dad has been working with for a couple dozen years. They claim that he's got bipolar, so they put him on a whole bunch of pills and almost killed him. Basically, he had a whole bunch of side effects, and we found out that he's not bipolar. It was all of this other information that we're trying to unravel ever since. So a little bit of context there.
He has his own personal reasons that caused him to kind of get into homelessness, and that's where our main conversation is. But my 5 problems that I've had, that I've filed paperwork in 5 institutions, the EEOC, Department of Regulations, CHHR, and some other ones as well. But basically, a business in town, I never ended up pursuing it due to the pill side effects, but basically what I assumed happened is a girl falsified a rape accusation against me, and the staff undid my work, blocked hallways, vandalized my car, took my tips, and tried to wrongfully terminate me. And I was distraught anyways, and I ended up getting a medical bill of $9,000 of an ER visit and a panic attack that night later. Through that, I reported all the crimes with him. I started to my doctor, Dr. Robert Lawrence, psychiatrist, and he, within 2 weeks, diagnosed me bipolar. And over a year, I was given 8 different antipsychotic medications, and halfway through, ended up in Mountain Crest, and more through that, ended up homeless. And there was a time where a cop did move me along and did write me a camping ticket in 2009. Somewhat similar to these homeless tickets. And then from there, I was trying to get better, and Five Guys burgers and fries just kind of ran me into the ground. I was getting older, not as athletic, a lot of pill side effects. Incurred another emergency room visit and more workman's comp. And then I went to a family doctor after they wouldn't give me workman's comp, and my parents and that doctor all kind of pseudo moved it into the court that it wasn't work-related. We never got completed of my injuries, and I still have pain promises to say. And then the last one was center partners in town. They just didn't accept any of my doctor's notes, and the entire time it makes it hard to take care of them. But then we both ended up into a house where our friends illegally evicted us, and we ended up getting $141,000 free unrelated rule fine from Delwood between And then that led into the homelessness, but we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But those were my 5 main real serious legal events that never got concluded that I think that was fraud.
So yeah, lots of paperwork. Workman's Comp has been trying to deal with bipolar misdiagnoses. I'm trying to figure out my wrongful conviction. Working with probation to try and pay whatever I can while trying to find jobs, places. A lot of places have like automatic no felonies for 10 years kind of blanket policies. It's really scary.
Can I ask,
Sure.
are you currently serving a probation sentence, or are you all done?
I'm still on a payment plan. It's like the lowest form ever, basically.
Okay, so you've got money to pay, but you're not.
Yeah,
You're just not
I still have like
supervised by-
$2,500 that the government
So you
asking
served
for
all
me.
of your sentence. and that's all.
Yeah, I got probation. It was a ISP. I never reoffended or anything. It was always good. Still good.
That's all wrapped up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just overpaid the heck out of it, but but where it gets really weird is where basically him and I were just trying to make ends meet. We're trying to find good jobs and places, get our paperwork going, get some of our rights back or our time back, and we came across the 3 unrelated rule, and we consider ourselves kind of yuppie, and we use that term. You know, we came from a rich background. My parents work at HP.
All of our family are billionaires.
And so yuppies have a way of when you're in high school, you go break the park curfew, you drink with your buddies, and then you grow up and you stop committing those types of crimes, and or you figure out how to bureaucratically fight it and so forth. But basically, we decided to break the 3 unrelated rule because we figured that there were enough variables that were at play with our needs, the cost of living, the type of policy that it is, how it's enforced. And so it's not like we're, breaking like a criminal statute that's on the books that has natural victims to it. These are what we call blanket policies that are, we understand that there are ways to curb costs. If you guys have trouble with like noise or parking violations, as the alleged goes, with students, but then if it's only students and it looks kind of discriminatory, so you end up doing it to basically unrelated people, older people, everybody. The whole town has to live with this 300 right now. We'll get to that more. But basically, we ended up breaking this for like a year, 9 months to a year, basically, because we were really quiet. We didn't have any parking problems. We were saving a lot on rent. Our 3 live-in landlords were renting to us, and so
There was also several other people before and after that broke as well in that house. And
Yeah.
I just remember throughout my entire rental history, Fort Collins bounced between apartments and higher rented houses. And, we don't have many friends, and basically that was our only friend at the time to crash in the basement. And they were happy to be living in a U+2.
Yeah, it's really hard with the felonies to find places. So it was just kind of like, pick your priorities. And so we're not usually lawbreakers, but we picked that one, and we successfully broke it. And that's what kind of cracked a lot more for us after that. So basically, the 3 people that we were living with, we couldn't pay rent 1 month. They
He was
tried
an
to.
old high school friend.
Yeah, so they tried to illegally evict us themselves. They threw all of our stuff out. We called the police. The police let us back in because it's a civil issue, eviction rights and so forth. But then they kind of got paranoid, and they ended up calling Dale Wood, the city's code inspector for the 3 unrelated rule.
We suspect that Dale was not going to get involved. We suspect that the one girl sent a letter to Dale, and then that's what initiated Dale to get involved.
And we
When
actually got the
eviction
letter
happened,
later and
I
stuff.
don't think Dale was ever notified. We've read the channels. I don't
So they basically turned themselves in for
Yeah.
the 3 unrelated.
Yeah.
Because they're really paranoid.
And so while there is this law that's on the books, we feel as though the way that it was actually executed ended up exposing that it's not necessarily a real law, and it's like a it hasn't been due process. People basically like the $38,000 that one guy was fined. It was actually $1,000 every week. They kind of changed the rules in terms of how they enforce it, so they wouldn't look bad, and the guy ends up settling and so forth. So we ended up discovering that it was sort of a racket. And that was the first time we ever kind of came across the term racket when we were researching law and criminal psychology and so forth. And so it's because these 3 people called Dale in on themselves. Dale came in, just started finding the 2 of us, and that's when we were like, whoa.
Only 2 sets of tickets showed up in the door. In the house, they put a letter on the fridge that said all 5 members, so it's automatically on the application. They also did other things such as rinses and turn off the heat and other kind of ways to get those when we still don't put that aside. And
But basically,
they kept letting them stay there while giving us tenancy to break the up past 3 for the law, to find only us, to leave them there, to leave it to another day, to break it again while we're going through the eviction. And he basically got stuck in a forced find loop of accidentally finding us. And like basically, if he warned the other 3 individuals, they would have left, and we would have been stuck with disability problems, getting out slower because they had more money or less problems. And so basically, they all thought, yeah, because they're not on the lease, we get to stay here even though they broke it and broke their lease and the landlord knew it, and they should probably all be kicked out. But they kept giving them tenancy, and we were going through eviction while they kept giving them tenancy while they were going through eviction.
And when did this happen?
This is about 2 years ago, so 2014, 2015.
Oh, hold on.
It was no, it was 2015 spring.
2015. Yep.
So it kind of cracked a lot of concepts for us. Basically, with them kind of calling it in on themselves.
We thought we were all going to go through it because we all said we were going to break it. We all said it was unconstitutional. But at the end, they were the ones who dipped out. Were the college students who didn't really care. Weren't one of them wasn't a resident in this town, and
Yeah.
one was an exchange student.
So
They were on, 3 of them were on the lease.
Yes.
yeah, and so we were the family members that weren't on lease. It's kind of an ironic twist.
Yeah.
But basically, they kind of tried to use the fines to remove us instead of the eviction. And so there's this toothless law out there that's kind of conflicting with the eviction courts. In the actual eviction court itself that we were trying to challenge just for our other rights, they ended up perjuring one of the tenants to try and cover up that there was no 300 labor rule. They said that they gave us a month tenancy, and it basically just...
Since we were past 30 days, we had tenancy there, so eviction courts
Yeah.
had precedence over it, and that was a state court over Dale's law, which is municipal law, and so that's who was stuck on
Yeah.
2 laws being applied at the same time.
And so, with the way that Dale kind of covered up with his paperwork, the way that one of the tenants had written a complaint and said, "But I'm simply this college student," and so on and so on, and then the person that lied in court over the other, basically, it kind of exposed.
Figuring out perjuring, submitting false documents for reporting, influencing, leaving things out. They were like going through our stuff, building cases all incorrectly.
And
we have an old friend, Lester Washington. I believe he worked under the city attorney, and he was the one who helped us help me pass the Senator Parker's file my first complaint. It didn't go anywhere, but it helped timestamp my life.
But basically, I have a really good computer background. I used to have a computer job. I lost it through hiatal hernia. I got really sick from having to deal with this. Talking to lawyers with my only lunch break during this period of time with the 300 rule. So I ended up losing this job and put up with this. Sorry, I put a really big detail I don't want to leave out. Okay, so let's put it this way. This kind of helped us discover what racketeering activities is. We learned what mafias are, thuggery, cronyism, kleptocracy.
Frivolous lawsuit where they bring someone to court and don't actually have the necessary elements. We use this idea called Brzezinski, which created a cure for cancer, and the cancer company sued him, but it didn't actually have the grounds to sue. That was a patent pending. So when we got to court, it's his burden of proof responsibilities to bring in the case, and he didn't. He basically wasted everyone's time.
Him being the prosecutor.
Him being the prosecutor, yeah.
Yeah. And so this kind of is what the framework was for going into homelessness. So once we finally went into homelessness here, I've already tried the shelters before. They have problems with not offering enough sleep. 5.5 hours of sleep is a really big problem. A different religion. Basically, a lot of people that were there would overhear conversations, and I'd be harassed, and so even threatened and so forth.
And they're a Catholic institution. We have these conversations. We're really mad at them.
Yeah. And so we tried the shelters again for a couple of days. Couldn't handle it. Ended up hiding in the forest, basically. It's our own hometown. We're trying to put together our paperwork.
There's one last step. after the 3 unrelated rule, my unemployment ran out. He just got a hernia, and so we both didn't have jobs, but we had enough time, 1.5 months to get back on our feet. So we moved into this other place, and a roommate basically mistaked us using TV, and it was actually his laptop, and he wasn't using the cable bill. He was really drunk, and he basically assaulted Will, grabbed his shirt, punched him in the face, chased him around the center of the house, up the stairs, chased me. I tripped up the stairs. We had to hold the door shut, call the cops, and the cops came, pressed charges, and the DA took it. And then he got it bumped down to an alcohol charge of some sort, and we never ended up getting any victims compensation.
And it's kind of hard to get victims compensation when you're just assaulted out of your residence, kind of domestic violence, but not because you're a guy and not many rights there. And I also lost my job at the same time. So basically, it's just the perfect storm. And so what we're trying to say is going to homelessness, there's very many different reasons why people are homeless. They could be disabled or addicted or any number of things. We were frauded, and that's kind of what we went.
We should know
going
that
into it.
every single time from the false rape and every single one I asked at least to move back home with my family or funds from extended family, nothing every single time, even before the 3 unrelated rule, that it is solved the homeless. So they're in some delusional deformation thinking that with drug addicts or something because they hate marijuana, even though it's very scientifically proven now. That's the only thing we ever have done with it, or alcohol, cigarettes. But,
And it's kind of like
Mormons that take things too far.
And basically, it's a trailing issue that never got resolved with the Mormons, the child abuse, the kleptomania, the stealing,
They can't trust us.
Yeah, so
it would go to waste.
Yeah, so it's a whole different world 12 years later. We haven't talked to them for 12 years. I cut them off as soon as I got to a certain point where it was really abusive, the relationship, 7 or 8 years prior. But we started talking to them again because every time we need help, we're going to try and go ask them for help. And so, but that's a really, really big part is this defamation of our entire extended family. We would have gotten really simple help by now if it weren't for these just really
Couches to sleep on,
you know,
right, and stuff like that.
But it's like a Mormon philosophical war going on right now between them and non-Mormons, and so they've segregated themselves. We couldn't ride the school buses growing up. They're a really big problem in terms of like what most people think of Mormons.
They basically segregate on a lot of levels. Video games, movies, riding the school bus, all that stuff as a way to kind of keep us away from what they think are criminal groups of people that we're going to slip into. That whole he's going to hang out with those kids and do drugs, but he can actually legally be hanging out at the party and not doing anything.
So we kind of got
not trustworthy.
We kind of got martyred for every little lesson that they wanted to teach us or by model or us with, instill in us, and basically we always rebelled because not because we're natural rebels against authority, but because it just didn't make any sense. And we had this lovely non-Mormon community with all these facts and so forth giving rise to us.
Treated
and so forth.
us nicer.
And so non-Mormon wise, I learned a lot basically throughout this entire period of religion-wise, of atheism, agnosticism, logical fallacies, science, math, just real basic stuff. And it kind of ended up being into a lot of law from this wrongful conviction I was trying to figure out. So due process now, 14th Amendment, burden of proof, what is a fact, evidence, elements, you name it. And so this is where it gets really scary, though. Okay, so 255.
You said 3:15.
Yep. Okay.
Pacing yourself.
Okay, so probably gonna have to pick this up later, but this is where we're at right now. We're
trying to complete the whole story.
Yeah. So going to homelessness, we're trying to be as responsible as we can, so we kind of stay out of the way as much as we can. We have tents and stuff, and so we ended up getting picked up by some rangers first. Actually, it was ELC.
First it was CSU ELC out there at the Environmental Learning Center, and basically we got away with it for a while. We know there's a formal warning process. I know it's illegal, but we have no choice. And basically, whenever they catch us, like say skateboarding, even if there's a sign there, most of them say don't skateboard. So he caught us and he said, don't ever camp again. It was fine. He said you can even come back. And if I catch you camping here tomorrow, blah, blah. Well, 2 hours later, a cop showed up at CSU ED, and writes us an exclusionary order, but then no trespassing ticket.
So they fudged it, and they said they refused to listen after he was told to leave, and so that kind of started the due process there. We still have to talk
We're
with them.
still permanently banned.
But we can pursue it after the year, and it's been a year now. But basically, exclusionary orders and formal warnings is a huge sweet spot we've now caught, where illegal behavior like that happens a lot, and no one knows the due process for it, so no one can find the paperwork except for that we have a source now. You can all look at the paperwork now. So that's
like
one of
level
many.
one employees not knowing how to warn someone out of a public-private institution, or like we heard a story from Chick-fil-A of some guy charging his phone, and say if you do it too long, maybe he's loitering or trespassing. But he said no one ever approached him, and the cops just showed up and just told him to leave.
No, actually, he wrote him a trespassing
Oh,
ticket.
actually wrote a ticket.
Yeah, he didn't ever receive any formal warning. That's at least what he's told us. And we've seen other situations where they've fudged the formal warning, but if you get a trespassing order to be banned from the entire place, it's usually because you violated some
If
warning.
you come back and do it a second
And so-
time, skateboard a second time,
Yeah.
drag race a second
So-
time, camp a second time.
Yeah, so naturally-
And you can still go back to the library, walk through and stuff, but these people are permanently banning on the first one and not even allowing us to try to be, not to do it again.
Yeah, so that's a really big hate crime we caught there of never being able to go back to CSU now because we allegedly violated their formal warning. And so basically...
That was the first homeless case. It was similar, like the terrain-related rule. We're starting to see lies on papers and stories not adding up.
Yeah.
And then from there, we had to move, and it was pretty bad. We were on bikes, and we had our gear. It's pretty brutal to call that a cross-up and everything. Height spot. We're not. So we got out of the spot, and it's Springer National Area.
Yeah.
And it was for again a couple weeks before. Kristen Powell, David Irwin, and Rhonda Peckham, Rangers caught us, left our tents there, but then the next day caught us. We couldn't pack it up that day. It's too much hassle. And wrote us a construction structure ticket. And I later thought that he was in, I believe, in jail at that time. And I proceeded that, and I won on 2 grounds of one, it wasn't a structure because I didn't use any construction material or stuff to make it permanent. She actually, Judge Lynn pulled up the actual definition book of structure material that didn't fit anything. And it was also, again, no map, and it was outside of Springer Natural Area, and that's something that you can only get in Springer Natural Area. You can get camping anywhere. You can start construction for some park.
So no elements there. We kind of, by the way, we first tried.
I asked the public defender who was representing me to be to fight it. He said there was nothing he could do to fight it, and 15. He said he helped lead out 15 to either 15 or 40 other people, and I asked if they were all homeless in cities.
So, by the way, if there's any construction structure tickets being written or being pled out right now, the judge struck that down as void for vagueness, so it's probably a really bad thing to be doing, generally speaking. But, so, words, trying to crunch. Okay, so this construction structure was the first place that we were hiding as best we could out of the way. From there, we got moved, so we picked another spot. This was Lee Martinez Park. This is where we kind of had a run-in with a ranger. Not run-in, but let's put it this way. We got to clarify. This is during the same time frame where we're meeting other homeless people on the streets. We're kind of getting their stories, their ideas, and we also happen to be just doing our own homework from our previous legal situations. And so we one day ended up in Soffico Park just in the afternoon.
Since we kind of get moved, we stayed to a region. Since we were moved from there, we ended up hanging out more in the northwest region, and involved Soffico Park and then Lee Martinez, where we got our camp.
Yeah, so the reason I have to bring up Soffico Park is because out of nowhere, a ranger came and basically was going to ask us some questions about this vehicle. But we had our gear, and we basically said to them,
there was a vehicle parked backwards, and it looked abandoned, and he approached us at the gazebo where we were charging our phones, and basically started off the conversation. Is that your vehicle? And it was already pretty stupid because we had bike gear right there.
So while we made a snappy comment, or not snappy, but basically not the most friendliest of out-of-nowhere comments, we said, hey, we don't answer questions.
If we don't like people, we say we don't answer any questions without being present, especially if they're pressing as soon as it looks like it matters.
And it wasn't sarcastic or anything, but basically we feel as though with the conditions, he ended up saying 3 things in a row that were derogatory, homeless, discrimination related, non-provoked. They fit the statute of 1891101H, and it went along these lines. Oh, that's interesting. And when we didn't respond, I'm going to get you on trespassing if you don't cooperate. We continue to not respond. I'm going to remember you guys, and he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of us.
And he took a picture of us, and the other rangers did it for a database when we caught us camping. And so when we weren't doing anything wrong, he whipped out the picture, phone and took a picture of us. That's when we started getting after him and saying, "Hey, man, that's harassment."
Okay, so I got to cram even more. This is tough. But basically, there was a alleged attempted citizen's arrest. As I was following him out there, I said, "Hey, man, I think a police officer should be here. I think this is harassment." But basically, I didn't touch him. He got in his car and he left. And so we filled out police reports. We explained it best as we could to the police officer there.
He basically attempted a citizen's arrest.
Not attempted. I didn't know really how the law worked, so I was really polite. It was basically, if you want to turn yourself in, I'm right here. I witnessed a crime, though, but I'm going to try and talk to you. Since he was running, I didn't
tackle him. All he did is say it, and we would assume that he would be polite and stay there for your cop to show up to take the statements.
Yeah, and it's a free false imprisonment charge too, if I'm wrong. You know, if you anyone can citizen's arrest anyone else, but if they don't follow through with the conviction, then naturally it's a false imprisonment. Or if you have a probable cause for a cop, then you don't have that.
Basically, he got in his Ranger truck and drove away, and then we called in Wes Haynes and his deputy friend. I don't know his name at the moment, but we have business cards.
Okay, so. Basically, though, this has all happened around the same time that we were also sleeping in Lee Martinez, and so we got the ticket from Mike West later, a couple weeks later, for this ticket. And while this is happening, we're explaining to him the previous citizen's arrest that I had just talked about. I said, "Hey, next time I see you and so forth, I'm gonna talk about this." And basically, it was over Salco Park. It was very, I didn't even attempt it during the tickets procedure. They were potentially saying like, hey, I think in the audio, they basically said, that's what the tickets are for. And so we're actually thinking at this point, later on going over the audio, that they might have thought that we were trying to citizens arrest over tickets. And so that never happened in the audio. You can go over the audio yourselves. It's very basic. And after that event was over, after they finished writing tickets, that's when I actually tried again, but I didn't really try. I said, "Hey, Mike West, look, man, I'm here again. The tickets are out of the way. You can do your job." Wes Haynes. And so that's why I said, "Hey, you're under citizen's arrest for writing or for Salco Park." And that's when Wes Haynes did say, "Don't touch him." And then I said, "Okay, you're under citizen's arrest now too, potentially, because it's a conspiracy to suppress my human rights." But I never actually followed through with it. And so it was just another a scuttle, but it's a polite battle. And so we didn't. I didn't know enough of the law at the time to actually follow through with it. But I knew that the statute existed, and if they were polite with it, I would follow through with it. But when you get obstruction charges and when anybody touches a cop, all sorts of other things happen. But basically, this is the framework for what ended up being Occupy Jefferson. We were at Occupy Jefferson at the time. We ended up meeting some other people on the streets that were also trying to exercise their rights. Had been illegally ticketed a while, Zach Humbert, and so forth.
Maybe 10 or 15 of them. About 5 of them we didn't really know too well. The other 5 pretty well, and the other 5 better than them. And they were the ones who knew law most of the time. Who was Zach and Kendra. A couple others said that they were given the same type of tickets that we were given before, so that they couldn't find anywhere to sleep. That they were. And
so during the protest, Giddings has some issues with boundaries, and he has the bright idea to go to the Parks Department to get the boundaries. And basically, we have an issue when it comes back and says that to us. We look at the sidewalk; it has no designation. We also had talked to the streets department, and they said, "Yeah, sidewalks don't close unless there's." And they called that a sidewalk as something of theirs. And so at the time, we hadn't actually gotten to the leases yet, but we knew, generally speaking, plats and stuff. We saw a construction blueprint to show where the actual plot lines are and the points and so forth.
First, there was a protest in the park. It was started by the the other homeless people first, and they the key was just to stay awake because it's a protest, to fall asleep, it's camping. And so they started arguing boundaries. They moved to the side of the road that was still in the park. That's when they started looking at things. Then we moved to the other sidewalk, and that's where we got involved and actually looked at more maps and found out that that was right away and it was never been part of Jefferson Park. And I was cited for a park curfew ticket being in Jefferson Park, and that was one of my trials that I took to court and proved through a couple means of no designation and no legend on his map, and inconsistent lines on his map, and basically I had more maps than him. I had a construction plat, town plat, and the blueprint of the building, I believe. So still to this day, even though it looks iffy, it's been right away. It's always been right away.
Okay, so yeah, now comes the nitty-gritty of the law. Okay, so basically he thought that that was good enough probable cause. He ended up winning a trial in county court for unlawful conduct. Basically, one hearsay, the district attorney pushed a bunch of crap
It was in the same
to...
sidewalk that I was in, that I won mine, that he wants to
That he-
repeat being in a park.
Yeah, so he already lost the underlying municipal version of this park curfew charge. It was also all over designation. And we also had since talked to the Parks Department, and they had rescinded any statements. They said they thought that area was public. We talked to the person, Jill Wirtz, who had produced the maps, said those were maintenance-based maps, and that basically there was no controversy on that side.
It was a trash pickup map is what we suspect.
Yeah.
It's not a real lease department.
And so I went to court. Burden of proof was on them, though, and so, but basically didn't, since I didn't bring the Parks Department, whenever I said something, it was hearsay, and basically they ended up wrongfully convicting me without evidence, without actual facts. I kid you not. If you go over the actual trial, it was his testimony, and all I said was hearsay, 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 and anytime I said I went to the Parks Department, they squashed me, said, objection, hearsay. So it was kind of
We
weird.
later went there
But-
anyways and got it from Bud and Mike Calhoun and the other that it's all on.
Yeah, and so we have that on audio too. We have a lot of other stuff that basically we went and just started getting their witness testimonies and so forth. But basically, Bud Brady Hoft, Mike Calhoun, and Steve Saman in there. They have no issues. The Parks Department is not the official source of boundaries. They're not claiming it whatsoever. But I had appealed this unlawful conduct trial, and the district attorney, Cliff Rydell, or his McDonald deputy, basically got enough of it that they said, no, the Parks Department is the official source for boundaries, and he was in the park. And so basically, now we're getting to the point where we're starting to catch cops ratifying illegal behavior in order to sort of retain a probable cause, basically, that there was no elements in the first place.
Ratifying is to change your ways of doing the new thing because you messed up. So say I'm like making a burger wrong the whole way, and someone tells me it's wrong. I just keep doing it wrong and call it the new way of doing things so that I don't get in trouble for doing it wrong that whole time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so rather than admit that the Parks Department is not the official source of boundaries, admit that you lied, that there were 2 leases for the Parks Department getting set in trial. There's no 2 leases. And we got the lease eventually, by the way. It's really easy to go down to the lease department once you learn that. But basically, the burden of proof was shifted, and I was all wrongfully convicted, and the DA had to ratify enough of the behavior that basically he's kind of caught to. And so it's sort of like a crony behavior that was just exposing more crony behavior. We got enough of it that people are going to try and ratify each other's lower behavior and so forth. So this is where it gets really, really sticky. Okay, so during the Occupy Jefferson protest, I made a comment that Mike West is digging himself a grave in the forest because his tickets are inconsistent, and basically he's going to get himself in trouble. And everyone knows that's saying digging yourself a grave. It's figurative.
And it wasn't even said in front of him.
Yeah, it wasn't even said in front of him. But Giddings took this out of context, literally took it with the other comment that I had made during the ticketing of the Southfield Park, Lee Martinez. Basically, I made a comment in general to them. I said, hey, man, you guys should quit your jobs and save your lives. You're not going to prison. It was a political hyperbole. We can go over all the details there later. It's something I have to either put through court or just explain to.
You were telling them
we were
that they're writing
tried to.
hate crime tickets and that you can basically be sued, lose your house.
Yeah, so there wasn't any threats there, but they took a A third citizen's arrest attempt, by the way, out of nowhere, which is still over Softkill Park, by the way, I have to throw that in. Basically, they trumped up a really, really crappy investigation that is now literally tantamount to actual attempted influence because of the way that Mike West had to actually formulate. He said what happened, and he said in a certain order that I said these things, and that I tried to citizen's arrest over tickets, that Mike West or that Wes Haynes said don't touch him, so forth and so on. And if you actually compare that to the audio of the actual event, 100% incomplete, or not even the same story. Each fact is literally opposite, and they had to do it because, well, let's put it this way, we feel like they lost their shit. We've gotten this before from other people that we've had to deal with, where they now want to get rid of somebody. They don't know how to, so they kind of trump up several different things.
Too emotional.
It was
They shouldn't be freaking out when there's actually nothing to freak out about.
yes.
So when these things that you're talking about right now?
So this is
That's past
fall
the
of 2015.
regulated rule, so 2015 going into 2016.
Early 2016, fall of 2015 and 2016. And so, but basically, we've tried to report that to Internal Affairs. Literally, just this is a document. This is what you compare the audio. This is the charge, and we've explained a lot of other things. They won't touch it either.
So basically, there's what he's saying is there's 3 events that led to him being charged with harassment, and then him being dropped, and him being under investigation for menacing, and then that changing to him being charged with attempted influence. And he's currently going to court, Fort Felony for attempted influence over those 3 events of Softball camping, and the 3rd incident, which he was basically trying to address Mike West's original harassment charge that he got with that one day. Wes Haynes. When we called Wes Haynes,
Yeah.
he did charge Mike West with harassment and didn't start any process. That's why he couldn't.
Yeah. So basically, we tried to report this to Internal Affairs. It has nothing to do with our guilt or innocence. We followed the actual procedures, and basically, it's separate crimes. There's enough probable cause that there's enough elements and so forth that there's the whole thing is basically literally a sham. But in 2 minutes, this is what I'm really going to explain.
We were getting better at protecting ourselves. We went out to our last spot in town with maps, told them that we had maps. It was in Gustav Swanson and the North College River. And they said that save it for court. We're like, do you have maps in the car? They said that you don't care which body cam footage. And then we went to court, showed our maps. They lied against their body cam footage, and it was dropped over the maps. And it was really obvious. And then at that point, it's pretty bad. They actually stalked and followed us out to the next sleep spot, so we had to ask our parents for a van to sleep in. And it was winter time too, and then that was when we got off.
So a strange relationship with our parents got us a van. That ended up actually giving us more tickets down in Denver. We caught 7 other jurisdictions with basically 25 to 50 more cops that are not using their elements. Basically,
What we explained to you was all the Fort Collins product.
Except for one final thing.
Except for one final. But basically, when we got a van, North Glen, Broomfield, Westminster, Federal Heights, Arvada, Denver, Commerce City, and one other one. And we basically...
It's okay. Basically, we caught a whole bunch of fraud of the exact same type where there's sweep spots where they've been taking people like this for years. No one's challenged it.
Mainly panhandling tickets that in Fort Collins, we got about maybe 6 run-ins with David Case and some other cops over panhandling on meetings until we got officially too slow to where we went to busier cities to pan. And then that's where we started picking up other cities' cops the same way over and over
Yeah.
and over and over.
And we've won all their trials,
Yep.
except for one, which is a wrongful conviction, but we can prove that anyways. But basically, this is where we have to leave off. This is the scariest, this is the biggest, this is really why we're here, is we've been trying to figure out a way to show to everybody the problems of society, allow for some reform, but it's not the prettiest way, and it's the nastiest way, but it had to be this way because we've tried bureaucratically with people before. So this is where it gets ugly.
One day we were just driving around January 2016, and we come across a fence on the east side of Safeway near the benches above or below a police no loitering sign.
And so this fence is purely up in the right-of-way. It's a 100-foot right-of-way. We know from the plats that from our previous cases, you can go down the City Docs website, 143-year-old plats. Also, you can look up plats for the Robinson Pearsall project, the original project, and so forth. Plot lines, everything. It's very basic. When we noticed this fence went up, it was for 3 weeks. Basically,
We're always cautious because we don't want to jump the gun and get charged for no reason. But we went to the city and notified the GIS department, Rob Mosby, and some others that there was a fence up in the right-of-way. lo and behold, does actually violate a crime. You're putting up a fence in the right of way.
It's a 23-84 violation. And so it's something that a cop can write. It's a law enforcement officer. It's a violation of the code. It's a standard misdemeanor, like anything else. And so,
we actually
Rob,
provoked the investigation for the takedown notice between Eric Holsapple and the city, saying, "Hey, man, you didn't get a permit. You got to take down the fence."
yeah. So we find out from this email chain that they put up as a temporary safety precaution to address homelessness in the area to lower the cost of some calls.
They were doing it to remove the benches.
But they kind of opened up their Christmas present before they got the permit for it, because there wasn't even a minor amendment submitted. They have to have a separate minor amendment and then also a fence permit once you start working on it. So there's two separate laws and concepts on that side. So there's no controversy. We talked to Rob Mosby, Ted Shepard, Rick Richter, all the people, 281. You guys are just fantastic. There's all the bureaucratic side, very good.
Yeah,
lots of
fine.
information. But so we get this takedown notice. You guys give us a copy of it, and we had a kind of an idea from our previous situations about cops that might be picking up people
Don't
without
trust homeless
elements.
People, don't give them a chance. Even if you
Defame
give
to
them
their
straight
face.
goals to work with, they'll be like, "I don't trust you," blah blah blah.
And-
Discrimination, basically.
And so basically, we jumped the fence that night.
Or just.
And I didn't.
actually did with him earlier in the day, and a cop passed by and didn't do anything. But then later at night, the cops were arresting this guy named Mel for trespassing in a Safeway, another homeless person. So we know these guys were definitely more homeless than cheap cops, let's call it. And he jumped the fence in front of them, and then.
And so I provided the email. I first explained everything, right of way, 100-foot plat, Robinson Pearsall. I talked about it, the entire thing, and I provided this email. And they basically did exactly what we figured would do. It's kind of a fake sting for real cops, or it's a real sting for fake cops. And so we were, basically.
It's not actually like taking out a
it
crack
was-
pipe and baiting it. It was really simple. We were just jumping a fence to be like, "This is right away. You can't touch this. It looks all guilty."
Yeah, it's already right of way. The due process in it is one, you have to go off of the fact that it's public property, and then you once you know that you don't know what the permit is, then that you can't go just touching them yet. That you don't have probable cause, reasonable suspicion yet. You have to go get the permit, or to see if there is none. And if there is no permit, then there's no reason to touch them or
If
pick
there
them
is
up
a
for
permit,
trespassing.
then it's trespassing. If it's private property, it's trespassing. There was no permit or private property.
So what did you want to have happen when you did that?
Either them to do nothing at all, if they're a smart cop, which we've had other cops in the past do this, and they just kind of realize that they're about to get a fake charge on them, or to basically get a real charge to prove the point that there's a homeless lynching denial problem of not going over elements. Basically, it was kind of a sting. And so,
Ultimately, it was a creative way to just get the cops to get after Eric Holsapple.
yeah, since they weren't taking
And
the
they-
original call of that 2384 offense, basically.
It is a misdemeanor, and they had the ability to write Eric Holsapple a ticket.
Yeah, and so our main problem is that we've discovered that there's a overall K through 12 kind of problem raising people in the cop force enough to give them knowledge about how probable cause really works, and basically it was a trap for someone who doesn't know how probable cause works. Basically, they ended up writing private property on it. They ended up leaving the email out of the warrantless arrest affidavit so that the judge would
They
rubber
said the
stamp it
email
more
was
easily.
forged. I gave them the email, and they basically said it was forged.
Yeah, and they didn't even finish reading the email, one of the police said, and so it was just to prove all these points. Basically, we feel, and from our previous tickets, we feel as though these cops have strategies and tactics to cover up as best they can, that they don't look bad, that they don't basically expose that they never learned what probable cause was, and so forth.
So we gave them
And
a
so-
scenario that you absolutely had to take the call, and if you absolutely don't take the call, then it's going to be really bad.
Yeah, so there's only three scenarios. Either I'm trespassing behind a fence that has a permit in the right of way, or I'm not trespassing behind this fence because it doesn't have a permit. It's also still in the right of way. Or some crazy pseudo probable cause the cops say. Well, we tried to report this to Horton already. He thinks that the knowledge of the area is why the cops were allowed to write private property for that area, because what we found out to be, what we're guessing is the knowledge of the area is the missing information that they don't know about the 2384 and so forth. Because we've actually now on the streets talked to a lot of cops. They don't know what definition of right of way even is. That's 1742. And
Long story short, he was charged with trespassing, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and obstruction of justice, and went to jail and had to bond out and lost 2 months. And my dad had to get involved, and it took a lot of time. Basically,
But basically, it's a running sting. I kid you not. Right now, you guys are the next people online. We've reported this fully to Internal Affairs. They are claiming that it's not something that they can touch because it's still up for court. But you can go talk to Rob yourself. We have
Rob Mosby, all those people have no problem
Ted,
saying
the surveyor, what's his name? John Venita, yeah, we know him pretty well too. And so all of these people, this time around, unlike unlawful conduct, we're going to go ahead and subpoena and so forth and so on. But basically, we're trying to prove that the DA is super corrupt, there's a couple of super corrupt cops, and that there's taxpayer dollars being super, super wasted, and there's basically super felonies we've been adding up.
So,
we have like hundreds of them at this point, and we can't even get it out fast enough.
So what's your next step on this?
Okay, so our problem here right now is that we can't get out the paperwork fast enough in order to even file right now. I have some motions I can file, and or we can
In your county court case?
Yeah, exactly. So we're still going to trial.
It's basically a daily ratio between both of us. He has a hypohernia, so it takes longer to eat his meals. Back injury, not as bad these days. But basically, throughout our day, we only get so much time to put toward paperwork, and then usually these torts that move us along in panhandling spots end up taking anywhere from a couple days to a week out when it happens at the surrounding spat ticket. And so we keep getting delayed, and we keep getting delayed, and we keep getting delayed. And we're trying to find a protected area, basically do our own paperwork and shit. We tried to go to the workforce center, and they banned me for printing too much paper. And then we went to Murphy Center, homeless. And said that these were homeless-related tickets over our disabilities and homelessness, and they said, "Yeah, you can print here all you want." When we were in a pinch, we actually went there and asked them to print out a motion for them. They decided to not at that last moment, and we were day late on it. So we have no resources to protect ourselves other than the public defender system, which is meant for poor people, but these people are stiff-nuts.
And so we're trying to
representing us.
And so we're literally backlogged on our paperwork for witness statements and affidavits for step one for reporting crimes of both
paperwork, putting in order,
the public defenders we've dealt with all the way dating back to the 12 years ago. Basically, very specifically now for the last 2 years, all the internal affairs, we have every conversation taped with them so that we can show that they're not doing their jobs and so forth.
All we want to do is clean our slate of all this information, and then from there, interactions like this only take one thing out of a week, and we can actually start getting back to jobs and focusing more on our own lives and stuff.
So given that we're already over time, what if there was one thing that you want the three of us to take away from this today? Like, what's the most important thing you want us?
Hands down, we have tried our best to report this to Internal Affairs. Craig Horton, I haven't been able to get the right definitions of words across, and he is what we consider compromised, and basically he says things like, well, I would have written that same ticket, or based upon my knowledge of the area, and basically he literally doesn't know what probable cause is either. And so we've done this with other internal affairs where we've had to keep reporting up, and we eventually got to someone who knew what we were talking about. And so we're doing the same thing here. We feel like these two open cases are literally
3 open cases.
Right with fraud.
Wait. So the
Okay.
3 open cases are the
The
Safeway,
Yeah, that's 16 CR 208, Safeway trespass.
the Soft.
And then that's just the attempted to influence case, 15 CR 1706. Two cases. There's a small one, but
Right, we've got one here in this.
yeah.
Okay.
Which, interestingly enough, too, by the way, there's some fraud there too.
So Safeway's in county court.
Yes.
And the second?
Attempted influence is they're both in district court.
Or sorry, yeah, both.
Both in district court.
Okay.
And so, while on one hand, there's always the save it for court lawyer mentality that we've been given, which we know our rights there. It's supposed to be burden of proof on you guys, and we're supposed to not have to put anything in motions, but we can, and so forth. And so I know in the end, if I actually get the time, I'm just really backlogged, I can put it together and basically do all of the homework. But I also feel like we've crossed a certain threshold where I think, given enough to internal affairs to work with these 3 cases. They flat out won't touch them because they say save it for court, and yet you can actually go through it. You can go talk to Rob, and you can go, look at the fence too, and so our way of proving it all, basically. Worst case scenario is that there's another fence that went up near Jefferson Park that is now closed. They're working on it. It's in the right of way. They did get a permit for it. It says sidewalk closed. We've reported that to Orton too. But yeah, that was the sidewalk that everyone was arrested on that
cops on a bunch of
that weekend.
box heaters in that park, and the cops let them stay on that sidewalk that we would have removed for being in the park. So it's pretty bad.
So it sounds like you've got arguments to think you can make in your pending cases, your problems, the time you have to pull together the information you want to pull together.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And then you've got complaints you've made to internal affairs that you feel like at this point haven't been addressed the way you would want them to be addressed.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and I don't even have the paperwork to reduce it down to this specific policy violations, but I can get you that too. It's all backlogs.
You've got a great way to explain it. So all these problems would have never even got to this room if the level one did their position and then did not fall apart for us to have to go to the next person, for them to be done and the next person, and so on and so forth.
And so we've our parents are kind of
Usually just
part of the
one
same
cop,
problem.
then a supervisor cop, then some sort of internal affairs, then a director. We got to run around in Denver, one of our cases, and finally someone at the top was like, okay, this is
Yeah. So summing up, the two things are the attempted influence and the trespassing case. On one hand, people might think we're just trying to racketeer to get out of it. We're lying, covering up, so forth, so on.
About the fence, and they're like, "Oh man, you got a plead," or "Oh man, you got nothing,"
Yeah.
and this and that. And that's kind of our whole point, was to not convolute it, and there's nothing there, and they're actually telling him to plead guilty to a fake charge.
Yeah, like my own parents and stuff. And so while we have what we're supposed to have is the rights for a fair trial for us to say the fence right now. We're concerned that it could turn into another unlawful conduct. We're also concerned that it was so freaking obvious that basically they're trying to ratify their own probable cause, say that that they're at least not going to lose in Florida, but it's literally not even playing for the same ball team. Not even the same ball team as a different park. And so I'm at the point with this sting of the fence that the DA, I've had enough conversations with him that I'm trying to expose as many cronies as possible. And so there's only there's two ways that it could always go, and that is to get through to somebody like you guys, where you actually go and just simply look over the same paperwork. And I guarantee you, if you know what probable cause is, or can find out, or see this thing, if you can perceive what the trial is going to look like, and it's not going to look well. I have audio, by the way, of the private business owner saying that's not even his property either. I got that before he even knew that I was him. But basically, my goal is to kind of go bowling in a weird way and take out as many cronies as I can. I actually don't want to drop it. I think I should have a fair trial, and if I get wrongfully convicted, then I should be able to get more fraud time.
You need a lawyer versus someone who can come to their own legal conclusion, and they're all accusing us that we need lawyers and we're stupid. I'm pretty sure you and everyone who's not compromised, emotional, crony, or has a job on will see it for what it really is, and it's just a public road.
And your Safeway case is on appeal right now?
No, that's the one that's currently going to trial.
Oh, I thought you'd had a trial.
Yeah, and that's the one that's still waiting. Well, both are still waiting for trials.
Okay, so you haven't been convicted on either one of those cases at this point?
No.
And so basically, the reason why we like the fence situation so much is because once we did it, it's all you guys' decision to go ahead and follow through, or your burden of proof is on you. Basically, we don't want to drop it ourselves because we would be doing your work for you. We would rather have you guys waste all your money and time to learn the hard way at this point.
What's your next court setting in the Safeway trespass case?
July 13th.
That's for-
Just disposition. They want to set over the trial to after the attempted influence trial, since it happened before. But basically, we have had so many trials in so many jurisdictions, and so many drop tickets before them, and so many cops even asked for their tickets back, not even showing up, taped out, so forth. It's just a huge waste of taxpayer dollars, and it comes down to what we believe is a very large problem with yuppies basically not wanting to admit that they're wrong, cronyism.
Court, you hear it from your friends, grandmas, uncle, whatever, but you didn't actually get it from the expert or in the book. And we see a lot of people use this big, thick book thing, and even when I was younger, called cell phone bill anxiety. My friend doesn't want to read the actual manual to know how a cell phone bill, but you have to read it to know how to use it. And so these people are basically not reading the manuals or going over the policies.
Yeah, and I hate to say this, but when I was stuck in jail for a couple months, wrongfully convicted down in Westminster, I had a whole bunch of time to go do more research, and basically every time that we get more interactions with cops, they kind of teach us more about the law and so forth, and so that's when we started getting to the point of stings. And so real quick, we can finish off with this. This is kind of what the cheese incident, or what the trespassing incident is to us. And it's a frivolous lawsuit where we're just trying to prove that the other side is setting up profiles that aren't really based on statutes, and they're basically wasting taxpayer dollars. That's where these blanket policies come in. The trade-related rule, the park curfew, and stuff like that.
A set of elements that say in an airport, you could set up enough variables to make it look like to catch a drug courier. But be careful, because you might not actually have all the elements, and each one might be tricking you.
And you might
take
actually
them off of the real elements, which we usually say to 6 things: what's written on a ticket, 1, the person, 2, mistake, or 3, at or about the date of time, 4, committed knowingly or unlawfully, 5, these physical acts of harassment, 6, this person.
Yeah, so all those elements. The jury instructions are great to. I think cops should be using jury instructions, by the way, instead of the actual statutes. They're way more descriptive. But basically, to sum up our forte of the problems of criminal law psychology in this country that we're really trying to reform, we had the perfect scenario present itself. We were in Commerce City, and there's a Walmart receipt checking policy, so they're trying to put their own little thing on the books kind of thing. But they're only instructed, at least with their employees, to ask you for a receipt. If you don't show it, they're supposed to simply write your description down, maybe catch you late in the lot, go look up some video footage. If you actually did steal it.
Costco has a forced policy that if you join their contract, you have to show your receipt every time, because they are open to the public in Texas or walk in. It's a half private, public. More companies have lost this, and so they basically started trying their own receipt checking policy.
But they can't make you show the receipt. But they set up these policies, kind of like the park curfew, to make someone kind of look guilty. And so basically, anytime that someone doesn't show their receipt, they're just supposed to do their investigation backwards. That's kind of an easy way of doing it, kind of like the park curfew gets rid of those graffitiers and stuff. It's backwards, whatever. But the whole point is if a cop is there when he shouldn't be, and or someone that has their own powers, like a security guard, detains somebody without actual evidence, and they're just simply using this pseudo-evidence that he didn't show a receipt as to why they're detaining him. Basically, I got a cop to falsely detain me over a fake investigation. I didn't show my receipt. The employee tried to stop me. I politely declined. And so they told me, hey, man, just show your receipt, man. You got nothing to hide. And so that's the whole thing of, like, if you got nothing to hide, just show it. But I've got rights. And so I exercised them. It was a joke, but I'm serious, though. It's a really serious thing, because this policy happens incorrectly with a lot of people. You can go online and see YouTube videos of people getting stopped all the time. But basically, the cop used their failed investigation. They said that they looked at some video footage real quick. They probably didn't. They gave me the ticket, and at the very end, after I'm being processed and so forth, there was a non-custodial arrest. I showed them the receipt, and then they're like, why didn't you show it to me before? And it's like, that was the whole point.
I guess the last thing to sum up is, we're really tired of one side thinking that the other side has to do the homework. That was the whole point, is you're supposed to do the investigation with the Walmart employees and spend your calories and time of your day to go find out.
Yeah.
And all these cops in your jurisdiction and the others basically have been writing these tickets and making us do all the homework to prove our innocence versus them to prove our guilt.
So we know that in the Fed situation they had access to the patrol maps. We mentioned the plats. We mentioned Rob Mosby. We actually gave a copy of the email. It's mentioned in the police report.
I did. It was 99 steps.
And so they actually lied about saying what I said. They said William said it was something to do with Safeway, and so also a violation of the policy of filling out good police reports. I'm willing to take a lie detector test compared to his. That's also in the reports, and no one wants to let me do that. But basically, the cop lied and just covered everything up, and we did it. We didn't do anything, but we showed that if someone's going to be that paranoid, schizophrenic, and that mentally ill, they might actually think that someone's there, and someone's not there. And if you go through the elements, either for private property or for public property, permission of another, premises of another, none of those are being met. It is an empty case. It is frivolous, and we're exposing it for what we can. So I know it's as much as we can get.
To understand where you guys are coming from and to have a better picture of all these things that you've been telling us about. I think necessarily the case the other person lied or had some sort of bad intent. I do think people sometimes see things differently. I'm not saying that that means that what you're describing is wrong and what somebody else might have described as right, but I do think that sometimes people do have a different sort of understanding of what went on, and it's helpful sometimes to think of it that way. But I guess the big question that I have in my mind at this point, and I know that we're running out of time, but I do have a big question about, I don't quite understand where you guys are headed in the big picture. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of things going on that you've described that I understand are significant pending matters that you're working to deal with and that are taking a lot of your time and energy. Assuming all that stuff went away, I mean, if the cases just got dismissed and there was maybe a fuller understanding of some of these things that you're describing that may be getting done in a way that could be done better. If all that happened, sort of what's next for you guys? Like, where do you go next? Because I appreciate your interest in seeing the system work right, but it does take a lot of resources for the system that's trying to deal with, public safety issues and risk for people and trying to sort of keep the community on an even keel. It takes a lot of resources too to be sort of going through this test and this kind of intricate dance about these things. And I'm not saying that any of you guys are wrong to have the questions that you have, but I just wonder, like, where does that take us eventually? I mean, do you guys, are you headed?
I'll sum it up to the whole umbrella paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
We caught these people in crimes, we want them charged, and we want our compensation. Simple as that. Same thing how he got arrested for his crimes. Same thing as someone speeding down the road. We feel like we caught these people in crimes, and we're trying to press charges.
It's sort of to sum up that. We already won a whole bunch of the cases for all these jurisdictions, so we already know what our rights are there. We're trying to get within our 2 years of statute of limitations. We have a bunch of ugly 42 USCs coming your way. So we can actually go to court over this if we really have to. Or you guys could just look at the actual paperwork itself. You can go look at it right now. It's so ugly. It's pretty simple. But basically, we caught so much fraud that if it goes reported and doesn't have anything happen to it in any of these jurisdictions, and if all of these people, internal affairs, attorneys, you guys don't do anything at all, we've already started to prepare the equivalent to a genocide complaint, a human trafficking complaint, crimes against humanity, so forth, for international crimes.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah.
What I think I'm hearing you say is where you have a disagreement with a police officer over how a case was handled, that constitutes fraud in the situations you're describing?
It's interesting you say that, and I'm glad you're narrowing it down. We've caught consistently the same pattern of behavior on tape, actual lies, like Giddings is a perfect example. The lying is the same type of behavior every time, that it's a systemic problem of K through 12 / WASPs or white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, a certain type of group of people, yuppies, or so forth and so on, that are basically getting away with covering up that they don't know what they're doing. And we caught so much of it, we caught it so fast that it's not really one situation anymore. It's sweep spots. It's future stings if we weren't so busy right now. We have all sorts of places.
We caught more security guards down there. It's just the same old behavior, basically. To put it this way, blacks, Mexicans, gays, poor people, Muslims, and other minorities are basically not doing this to us. It's only rich capitalists. If we keep walking around poor and these people keep committing felonies, that's what we're just simply looking for in every jurisdiction, then it becomes a real problem if we end up losing years. Every one of these scenarios, too, these people are in the actual mindset of thinking it's real, that if we were to exercise our rights the real way and run away like we know it's a big ticket, they might actually tase and shoot us. That's where I think it would really cross the line with every one of them was a jail sentence.
So we're political dissidents, silenced whistleblowers from birth, the whole Mormonism thing. We've tried to report this all to our parents. We keep getting bounced back and forth between their stat fraud.
All of our family members, and they
And-
Really nothing.
And so ultimately, we call it stat fraud because we see that no one's caring to go to actually read the actual things that go on in court. All my cases were dropped. Basically, everyone's waiting for our 42 USCs to police themselves with when there's blatant felonies in front of you guys, left and right. If you simply opened up those two cases, you can literally read for yourself and be like, what are we going to court over? This is burden of proof. Is none of the elements aren't even met. It's just
Courtroom is normally
picking up people.
for a criminal, and say he's actually arrested, then they have the lawful jurisdiction to start physically moving his body and cuffing him. And basically, they don't want to admit that the same laws can be applied to them if they pick up someone without any lawful justification. The very processing of that person is felonies everywhere. First, you need to submit a false document reporting. Then you need to attempt to influence the personnel around. Then you basically end up purging the court, and then pretty dirty stuff, honestly.
So, are we going to have to police all the police for the police, or can we get any help anywhere? We tried to report to Internal Affairs. We're still trying to get the actual nitty-gritty details to even you guys to see what happened to Internal Affairs. So the due process is always stuck there. But we've caught a lot of felonies.
Where I am at this moment, or based on this discussion, is that, like I say, it's helpful to understand where you guys are coming from on this. I think it's fair for there to be some expectation of mutual accountability in the sense that I think, the system has been trying to hold you guys accountable, maybe in a way that sometimes hasn't been, it sounds like exactly the way maybe the system is supposed to work. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys. And I think that sort of the flip side of that is, I think, as participants in the system, you guys, I think, probably recognize that you have some accountability too, just in, there are laws that are meant to be followed, and, that is what law enforcement is there to do, is to try to keep people, ideally, and I know that we have maybe differences of opinion in this, but in your perfect vision of how law enforcement would work, I suspect what you would see is law enforcement fairly holding the citizens and the people that we're calling accountable to comply with the appropriate laws that are in place. But that's what the system is for.
Yeah,
I mean,
which we weren't in violation of any of them either. So absolutely.
I
We
guess
also
the way to
feel.
explain it is there's laws in the books that are everyone in all culture will always be with murder, rape, theft. Basically, these are blanket policies that are unique only to these towns. and
Kind of
this
corporate
part of the
policies.
world. And throughout all these cases, we were never purging, submitting any false documents or anything, basically, because we picked up clean. And we were willing to case law every one of those, which is only part curfew, campaign, and construction structure, because Oregon and other states have already lost lawsuits because the homeless shelters didn't have space available. And they said it was unconstitutional to ticket people on the streets who couldn't find shelter fast enough.
So let's put it this way. This is good that we're getting down to this. I've wanted to do this for like years now. Basically, we feel as though, and we've seen this with other jurisdictions now, that any policy that gets put on the books that's not a natural criminal law and it's just a corporate policy, it's going to set up a profile, and especially if it's tailored toward a certain demographic, people like homeless people or so forth, like panhandling laws or park curfew laws. Not most people that use park curfews are going to be campering at night, so forth and so on. We find that these policies end up creating profiles that don't really actually due process anybody the real way. And so I think naturally all of these laws are going to continue to financially even bankrupt this sector.
Yeah, we're not the first ones.
So, like, for
Every
instance,
person
the
who's going to get picked up like this after this that now has
yeah,
suits.
or let's put it this way: the three unrelated rule, instead of dealing with the noise and parking on their due process level, you deal with the blanket. And
Since
so,
we're way over time,
sorry.
I do feel like I need to tell you guys that I think we probably have some disagreements about some of those things.
Sure.
Because I think, we do have some role and responsibility for looking at the laws that the city has in place and evaluating whether those are consistent with the U.S. Constitution, this Colorado Constitution, other kind of legal precedent that we things, and I suspect we have some disagreement about some of those things, and whether some of the laws that the city has in the books are defensible. There probably are laws we think are defensible based on our legal analysis, as you may disagree with. And, that's what the system is for. I mean, none of us are judges, and so we don't get ultimately to say that. That's what the court system is there for. And, we understand that that's sometimes how these issues get resolved, is that a judge tells us if they agree with us, or if they agree with you, or maybe someone else they agree with. And so I think it's important and fair to kind of think about that as something that in some cases is going to be the process that gets used to resolve a disagreement. And it doesn't mean that anybody has bad intent. It means that we have a disagreement, and those don't have to be.
Yeah.
They don't
Well,
have to be
here's a good way to
adversarial
explain it.
and.
We're not going around saying these people are blatant kidnappers putting hoods over your head during your trunks. But basically, when we're not that profile and our rights collide with the blanket policy, we tell these cops that they have no case every single time you pull up to their face.
And sometimes.
To the
And
face.
when they don't allow that, then the very processing of me really feels like kidnapping.
It's actually malicious
They have
prosecution
nothing.
is what it ends up
So
being.
malicious prosecution is probably the
So
best.
the
way.
fact that they disagree with you doesn't, I mean, I guess, I don't want to get into a debate and we're out of time, but I guess the one thing I would ask you to please think about is that sometimes you may believe that a law is not constitutional or not proper, and you may be right ultimately, but right now that might not be a clearly established legal principle, and so
This may be
it's a
very-
little unfair to call the cop a kidnapper when what they have in front of them is a law that they're being told to enforce. So, and
Actually,
I know
I
that's
guess
not the whole story.
Actually, the best way, absolutely, to put it is we keep catching things that are not that type of complicated behavior that needs to be argued in court. We're literally catching them not reading the actual statute and just simply picking us up on private property or outside of
Oh,
the
yeah,
actual
all these
mapped
were
area.
outside of jurisdictions.
And,
We didn't even actually fit it. We weren't actually in the parks. We were.
Yeah, and the
outside.
definitions were different, and so basically,
So I
our way to
acknowledge
prove
those
it.
are two different,
I
those
see
are
those
two
as,
different things.
those are training issues or issues that are individual to that case more than do we agree with this law or not. And I'm more interested in trying to address some of those.
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to sum up ultimately was while these laws may be good to be put on the books, what we're saying is no amount of education on how to enforce the parks is going to battle the natural racism that we've caught through the rich people discriminating against poor people using these laws and however they see fit. And so we're just there to hold them to the fire. You guys can technically have any laws you want. We just want you to do it right. And so far, we have not caught any of it being done right. And the best way we have been able to sum it up to make sure that kind of we know that it's not necessarily a bureaucratic disagreement that needs to go to court is we've actually caught what we call ghost protocols, where we know they exist. And so, for instance, we had all this issue with Occupy Jefferson being on that sidewalk. A couple months later, with this court process is still pending, we happened to call the cops on some other more yuppie people, not homeless, hanging out in the park. They were moved to the sidewalk without issue. We have other situations where we call up a cop to say, hey, would you ticket that same guy in that exact same place? And he's like, no, dude, that's public property and stuff. And so we already have both sides, and every single time it's the same thing.
Personally, and poor people, and then whenever a rich person's around, they get treated differently.
Yeah. So
Over the same exact objectable wrong that we were on that sidewalk that let those be spots.
yeah, so it's kind of like on one hand, you guys are willing to send a takedown notice for this 2384 fence, but then on the other hand, you're going to be completely obvious denial of fact that this is even public land and over here, and you won't listen to the homeless guy, and it's a sting,
I see
for that
what you're
reason.
saying. Technically,
So.
the only one we're arguing the real way is the camping tickets on unlawful conduct, because that's where we are in the actual jurisdictions.
Which is an appeal process, bureaucratic, and so forth. These are all literal step zero. You guys didn't use a map, and we were outside your park,
You were
and it
even
was so
willing to
easy.
tell
We
them
used
the
our own
truth
maps.
That we weren't
And,
that category, that you could have got us on something else.
Yeah.
So do you think the officers in those cases were doing something criminal, or were they just ignorant? about where the boundaries were.
If it,
And is
if
ignorance
it,
a crime?
yeah, no. If you're a cop, there is no ignorance because you're tasked with upholding all of the governing law. So
They just don't have access to
no
city
probable
maps
cause.
in the middle of the night.
True, but then that's the whole point, is that that's like a fake exigent circumstance, that you can go look at him, you can go take a map, you can get a survey out there first. But we seem to be catching these people in reckless negligence. We give them the facts to their faces. They pretend not to hear it. They try and keep that was a private road, and basically we present their own maps to them in court, and they're like, we don't recognize
Every
that.
scenario
So
that
it's not
happens
an
is
innocent
always different later in court
way.
because it's all basically lied over, and then we're the only ones who are consistently saying the same thing every time. So every scenario is really bad. Then why are they covering stuff up? Why are they tiptoeing?
Yeah, at first it was like a, I'm sorry. At first it was at first we thought it might just be a conduct versus now what we call a status, which is these people really need help. I think.
If it was an individual cop, then it would just been that one-off case. But then since it was basically the runaround all the way down to Denver and back over the same behaviors.
Yep. So basically, we just have more paperwork to do. I think there's more than enough just with those two cases just to go look and see how ugly they are. The whole point is that it's like it was a rubber stamp to see how far it would go. And if you guys drop it, then I win. If you guys don't drop it, then I win, because the whole point is that you're going to be spending all this taxpayer dollars in court still thinking that you have the elements. I'm pretty sure if you actually went over the elements, you're not allowed to assume elements. Probable cause is an objectively reasonable cop, and
Not subjective.
we already have cops saying that that's already public land and that the case is already over. In fact, they already thought. There's a lot of gossip about me in the police force, and so there's even cops that came up and tell me, hey man, that case is over and stuff, and I'm like, yeah. So the objectively reasonable cop would say that that is public land. We're going to take, we already have lots of audio of every other cop that we've come across that has no disagreement there, except for the cops that night that are basically trying to get out of that fake exigent circumstance. They thought they had a guy behind a fence. That was the whole point, is that, if you think you do, all you got to do is just go check your permit real quick. I'm pretty sure you can't charge the guy and then tomorrow drop it once you go check your permit. And so, but it's a homeless hate crime that we're trying to expose, basically. So. Sorry for jumping in. We're truly just trying to whistleblow, trying to turn in a bunch of felonies that are just happening under you guys' noses, literally right underneath you. And well, the way we'd sum it up is that there's a lot of these sweep spots. People have been doing this for years. 460 South College, there's been a lot of previous people that we've looked up that have been moving along from that same exact location for years. And so,
It's not really a sweep spot. It's a sweep person that creates a sweep spot, and that
Yeah.
guy just doesn't do his job forever. So yeah, on the east side of Safeway, the cops have been doing that for years, and we've heard security handling.
So we're just trying to literally turn the lights backwards. Nobody wants to look backwards at the cops. No one wants to look at the DAs. But there is rampant fraud, and there's also way more people in jail than should be, based upon a couple of little things we've caught with the bond system too. So we're trying to save money ultimately, but if you guys don't see what we see, we don't want to use the word crony, but it's like, if you guys feel as though it's not your position and so forth, we'll do it the hard way. We're used to that. But what we're trying to sum it up as is with facts this obvious, especially when you use deeds and plats and maps. What we've been trying to report is to the point where when we go to the 42 USC courts, the jury's there, we're going to explain to them a malicious prosecution sentence enhancer, because it was an obvious denial of fact. It was reckless disregard for the truth. Truth was staring you guys in the face. We were telling you this whole entire time. We've been telling our parents. We've been telling everybody. And if nobody wants to do anything, then that's their decision, and rights and so forth. And so we're not holding you to any fires or anything, but we're saying that I truly think you guys are in more of a better position than we've met anyone else below you guys. We also have a hard time getting across this many words to those guys. So this is good, but really, truthfully speaking, It was a Trojan horse, that fence situation. Eric Holzapfel put up an actual hate crime. You can go see the actual email chain. I'm trying to get it all to you guys anyways. I'm literally trying to just put it up on YouTube so everyone could see. But ultimately, we feel as though Fort Collins may have a very large image problem in order to try and save money by not looking bad so tourists don't come here and so forth. And so there's a lot of people that are covering up crimes. The racketeering activities cover up crimes. It's simple. Perjury, it's stuff like that. We're all adults here.
If you're ever curious,
I think we can work better.
Our names in all those other jurisdictions down in Denver.
So yeah, there's a lot of ugly stuff. So we just keep catching it. We're just trying to report it as fast as we can. We're doing okay, but man, we're backlogged the heck out of paperwork. So
We're really good with tech skills and typing fast work.
But basically, we feel as though I think we're doing more of your guys' internal affairs work than you should have us do.
Thank you, guys.
We tried our best with Horton. We haven't all. It's bad. But really, that's why we did the sting of defense, is so that if worst case scenario, if no one believes us, you guys still have to go to court, and we still have to present something to somebody for something. And so it's going to be an empty case like the Brzezinski.
I guess a crude way to explain the fence is black guy hears wind of racist cops down by the docks, and he just walks, just being his black self, and gets arrested, and then just trunk up for the person.
So, because if we weren't picked up off those elements, which are really easy, then what were we picked up off?
Yeah. What
So-
was?
Thank you for listening. I'm really sorry. I don't mean any sarcasm or anything. It's really hard to talk about these things, but our own family.
Really,
was
thank you. This
missing,
is a
so-
very peaceful conversation. Usually
Yeah.
people are really mean.
And we're a little short fused too, so thanks. Take care.